bird on a tree. I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together. It's so beautiful, you and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free.
This video will explain the purpose and practicalities of written representations. Written representations are written confirmations of certain matters from the directors to the auditors. It is a form of evidence to assist the auditor in forming their independent opinion. They are often also referred to as the letter of representation, but both terms mean the same thing. The purpose of written representations as evidence is to obtain confirmation that management have fulfilled their responsibilities in preparing the financial statements. This includes preparing the financial statements in accordance with financial reporting frameworks, providing relevant explanations, information, books and records to the auditor, and including all transactions and events within the financial statements. Written representations also act as supporting evidence of matters that the auditor feels necessary to form sufficient appropriate evidence. This could be if required by auditing standards, or if there are areas of the financial statements that are more challenging to gather on, for example balances that contain estimates or judgment decisions made by the directors. Guidance is given from ISA 580 written representations. For there to be enough evidence to form an independent opinion, the auditor must obtain a written representation statement from the client management. As written representations are client-generated, they may be subject to bias and are therefore not the most reliable forms of evidence to obtain. This is why the auditor requests this at the end of the audit process, so they can evaluate the evidence collected so far and ensure that, with the written representation, evidence as a whole is sufficient and appropriate. When written representations are obtained, if they are not consistent with the evidence collected so far, the auditor must consider whether the representations are reliable, whether audit risk, the risk of giving an inappropriate opinion, is higher than first planned, and if the audit procedures completed so far are enough and whether further testing is needed. If deemed unreliable, the auditor may decide they can no longer continue the audit engagement. It will also potentially affect the audit opinion, as if not reliable, there will be not enough sufficient appropriate evidence and so a disclaimer may be issued. If the management provide a written representation to the auditor with no inconsistencies, then the auditor will be satisfied that, as evidence, this will assist forming the audit opinion. If the management refuse to provide written representations, steps should be followed by the auditor. Firstly, the auditor should discuss with management the reasons why they will not provide written representations. They should also explain the importance of them to the client. They should then consider whether client management integrity is impaired and whether other evidence gathered internally from the client may be unreliable. If the client will still not provide the written representation, then the auditors do not have sufficient appropriate evidence. They will therefore modify the audit report with a disclaimer stating that they are unable to form an opinion. The format of the written representation can vary. It can be a written statement prepared by the client, or it can be a letter or statement prepared by the auditor and then finalised by the client on headed paper. Either way, the written representation must be signed by a senior member of the management of the client, for example, the chief executive or the chief financial officer. The written representation must be signed on the same date that the financial statements are authorised. This should be before the audit report is finalised, as the opinion needs to take into account the content of this evidence. To conclude, We have covered written representations are evidence required by the auditor. Their purpose is to confirm matters of importance by the directors and also back up areas where evidence has been difficult to obtain. Guidance on this evidence is from ISA 580. They are not always the most reliable evidence, and the client may refuse to provide this written representation. The auditor must consider the impact any issues regarding representations have on the audit report, and if obtained, ensure they are prepared, dated and signed before the audit report is prepared. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for watching.